Hello everyone, my name is Javier Cáceres and today we will have a MVC deep dive. That's my Twitter account, Hakase. That's my blog, hakase.wordpress.com. So if you wanna reach me out, just drop me a note there. This is the agenda that we will have today. The first part is about dependency injection, all about dependency injection in ASP.NET VNX, and that section is called Bring Your Own Container. Then we will talk about building a RESTful API with MVC6, and finally, if we have time, we will talk about injecting that data services into use. So let's get started. Dependency injection in ASP.NET VNX. Okay, this is a little bit of context. So dependency injection is a new old friend, okay, and these are three different ideas, or three very similar ideas. They look different but they are very similar, and they all try to meet the same goal. So dependency inversion principle is a practice. Is the D in the solid mnemonic acronym. It tells us that it's better depend on abstractions rather than on specific types, rather than on concrete types. There are several ways to accomplish the same goal. So, in order to favor loosely coupling, you can actually use different design patterns. For example, plugin, adapter, and dependency injection as such, and this one is a specific type of inversion of control. Also remember that inversion of control is similar to the Hollywood principle. Don't call us, we will call you. So it's three apparently different things, but they all try to meet the same goal, and the goal is loosely coupling. Loosely coupling by inversion of control, by dependency inversion, by the Hollywood principle. Just in case you're wondering who is the lady in the picture, her name is Barbara Liskop. She is the L in the solid mnemonic acronym. So I just wanted to put her picture here because I think that she was part of a kind of golden age, golden generation. It just happens that she received her PhD, her honoris PhD, at the same date from the same university, from Zurich, I think, and this guy here, this senior male here, is Donald Knott. So Donald Knott invented a semi-random sequence of numbers. So thanks to this guy, every time we use the random functions, we get numbers that look like random numbers. But it's just math science. So I just wanted to put her pictures. Okay, so dependency injection has been around for a while, since MVC2. Back in the days, the custom controller factories were made available. So in that time, we had this class, and we had to extend the class and override the create controller function. So in that time, we have to search for a specific key. Depending on the key, we created a new concrete type. So that was MVC2. Okay. In MVC3, Microsoft realized that we, the developers, software architects, needed more extension points. So they made available the iController activator and the iDependency resolver interfaces. And they also did it in part because they discovered that there were some issues around default controller factory around extending this class. So as soon as this was made available, it became the preferred method of dependency injection by frameworks like Unity. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about those issues. So if you have a closer look at this code, you will find that this is violating, if you have a closer look at this implementation, you will notice that when this function create controller is overridden, basically we were violating basic principle, the separation of concerns, because here we are doing two things. We are searching for a key and we are initializing a class, a data type. And there is a principle saying that a function should have one and only one purpose. So that's one of the reasons why they put this into separate pieces, into separate interfaces. Okay, in MVC6 we have a minimalistic DI container out of the box. So you might be wondering, why on earth is Microsoft providing another dependency injection if we have already like thousands of them? The answer is quite simple. This is supposed to be minimalistic. This is supposed to be simple, so they didn't want to add dependencies to any external component. Instead, they wanted to provide a simple DI container. Anyway, AutoFac is already supported in the 2014 CTP version. So it's for some people, with personal preferences, it might look like bad news, but they are not. And there are some well-known limitations, like it only supports constructor injection, so there is no getter setter. It can only resolve types with one and only one public constructor, and it doesn't support advanced features. So with this new dependency injector with this minimalistic DI, we only need to do this step. So we need to map this interface to the actual type. Okay, so let's see this working. In the previous version of in the previous version of MVC and in the new version. So this is Visual Studio 2013, and let's walk through the 5 steps that were required to create to use dependency injection. So the first step, it was about creating this interface. So this interface is like nothing new, it's just a plain interface. The second step was implementing that interface. So here we are implementing that interface. This interface in this example is for handling errors, a kind of error management strategy. And then this specific class is for handling security related errors like authentication and authorization. The third step was related with this extended or custom controller factory. So this is the same from the slide. The next step was modifying one of the controllers in order to use this new dependency injection capability. So here we have the public constructor with one and only one, and dependency injection in the constructor. Here we are using it, and this is the interface. Okay, so it's there. And the last step, it was a configuration related step. So for these kind of parameters, we used to use the global ASACs. So here in the global ASACs, you will notice that we have a set controller factory, and we are using the specific custom controller factory. So those were the steps required to use dependency injection. And whenever we request that page, then we will see this message: an authentication error occurred. So this is the message. This is the message: an authentication error occurred. So let's see how this works in Visual Studio 2015. So for this particular version, three of those steps are the same. So I mean, we need the same interface, we need the same class implementing the interface, we need to use it in the controller. Here we are using it in the controller, but the difference is in the configuration part. So for this new version, remember that in this version we don't have global ASACs. Please remember as well that we don't have project files, but what we have is project JSON files, and in this file you can put your dependencies, or the DLLs and stuff. In this file bower.json, that file you put JavaScript client-side dependencies. So okay, let's go back to the point. So we don't have a global ASACs, but we do have a startup.cs. So in that startup.cs there is a section, and in that section you can set up the request pipeline, the ASP.NET request pipeline. So you can set up this file, and this is where you map the interface with the actual implementation using the out-of-the-box minimalistic container. So let's see it's working. So it will work as expected, and let's call the same page out error, and we should get the message in 3, 2, 1. That's the message: an authentication error occurred. Okay, let's keep going. So that was the demo. So I just mentioned that I just want to stop for a second, because this is a new version of Visual Studio, so there are new things. So I just mentioned that file startup.cs is useful to set up the ASP.NET request pipeline. So you might be wondering, okay, and what's that ASP.NET request pipeline anyway? So there is a long explanation and there is a short explanation. So there is a cool poster, and that would be the long explanation. This poster was created by Redgate, and in this poster you can see step by step a very low detailed level. That's the URL. But I also searched for a summary. So this is the ASP.NET request pipeline. This is all about the steps that happens between the user requesting a web page or clients consuming a service and the actual response. So you have different steps like the request, then there is a routing mechanism, then we have the MVC handlers, then we have the controllers. This is your code. The action is executed, your code is executed. There is a view result response, which is passed to the view engine. It might be Razor or it might be ASP web forms, ASPNET web forms, and then the view is rendered, is written out, is sent back as a response to the browser. So this is the request pipeline, just in case you're wondering. Okay, this is the second part of this presentation, and it's about building a RESTful API with MVC6. Just before starting, I would like to share with you my definition about a RESTful API, because there are different versions. You can ask 5 people about what's a RESTful API and you will get very likely 5 different definitions for that. So if you ask me what's my own definition of a RESTful API, what I'm gonna tell you is that it's an API that can be rated using the Richardson maturity model. So what's this maturity model? If you're not familiar with this framework, don't worry. This is the picture word of 1,000 words. So every time you expose services, you can rate your service according to the capabilities or the features that they are presenting. So in the level 0, basically you have a set of services and they expose a functionality via an endpoint. That's all. Usually the data format that you receive and reply is plain old XML. Okay, so that's level 0. If you have something like that, you are Richardson level 0. If you stop talking about endpoints and if you start talking about resources and if you start grouping your functionality into resources, like logical units, then you're level 1. If you start using the HTTP verbs get, post, delete, put, and so on, then you're level 2. And finally, if you start using hypermedia controls, then you're level 3, and that would be the nirvana, the glory of REST. What's level 3 anyway? There is no consensus about how to use hypermedia in the hypermedia elements in the industry, but one of the most common uses of this is for paging and for using links that point to more information. So for example, if we are listing a slot resource, we will get a list of slots items. This is item 1, this is item 2, and in this item we can get a link, and this link contains some URIs to more information. So this is one of the most common usages of hypermedia controls. Okay, good. Let's go to the RESTful API demo. Okay, so this is the demo. Well, whenever you're gonna build a RESTful API, the first step is about data types. What are you going to expose? So in this case, there is a simple data type, and it's actually the model. I won't have data transfer objects. So this is just a session, and a talk like this one usually have a presenter. That's me. There is usually a description. That's MVC deep dive, and there is a unique identifier. The second step is about building a controller. So we have our controller here. Our controller has some properties. So there are some properties for routing. So every time people goes to API, that's going to point to this controller. And there are different functions. The most basic function is the get function. Get no parameters, so that will return a list of sessions. The next one would be there is a get, but there is a filter, there is a search criteria. So every time the description contains the first element that contains this description as part of the description, this text as part of the description is going to be returned. Otherwise, it's going to return a HTTP not found error. And please pay attention to this object result. There is no JSON there is no view, it's an object result. And there are a couple more of functions. So we have here the create. The create, as you might expect, it receives a model. There are some basic validations. If it's not valid, then the 400 error is returned. So 400 means bad input, bad parameters. Then the unique identifier is generated. The unique identifier is generated. The URL with the recently created results is returned here, and then the error 201 is returned. Sorry, the status code 201. We will come back to this shortly. And finally, we have the delete. So in the delete, I will perform a search using the UI, the global unique identifier, and if it's found, the item is removed from the collection, and a 204 is returned. So let's see this working. Okay, it should work in 3, 2, 1. So the first one is session, API session. So this will call the list. It will return the complete list. So this is this presentation, MVC deep dive. And there is another one which is expecting some parameters. So for example, let's make it return the first element which contains a B in the description. So that's MVC deep dive. Okay, so that's the demo. Let's continue here. So let's go back to the HTTP codes, because that's quite important. So the first one in the demo was, let's go back to here, is 204. What does that mean? It means no content. It's similar to empty. You know, this is what you usually reply when you have deleted, when you have removed an item. So what's 201? 201 is when you have created an item. This is a simple scenario. This is a simple situation, but in time-consuming scenarios, I would suggest you to return a 202, which means accepted, received, but it's not processed at that particular point of time. So when you return 202, you can actually, you know, maybe if you need to place the item in a queue, and if you're going to process it later, the best idea is to return at 202. No more error codes. No, sorry, no more HTTP codes. This is another question, and is when you use put and when would you use patch. So put is when you need to update the whole element, I mean all the attributes in the item, but patch is when you are going to update only few fields of that. Finally, this is an open conversation. What kind of names do you prefer in the controller actions? So for example, if you have a resource like session, would you name your actions like create session, delete session, list session, or would you create them, you know, as generic names like list, delete? So it's just different things, different best practice, or even practice, you know, a set of practice that you need to adopt in your developments. So finally, some feedback. This is how the object result. So it's, you know, it's good news that all these projects are open source, because actually you can go to GitHub, and if you don't like something, you can change it by yourself. So in this case, I was wondering about what's the story of the object result. And well, I was digging into the code and I found that there is a function execute result, and this function works with the content types. So when the content type is JSON callback, then this calls a function called serialize to JSON P. The content type is JSON, then there is a serialize to JSON, or if it's empty, or if it's application JSON, then this one is called serialize to JSON, and if it's empty, it calls as serialize to XML. So why am I showing you this? Because I want you to engage in the open source community, the open source development, and this is a good example of things that you might not agree, and things that can be improved. So I particularly don't like this implementation. Why? Because I don't like this kind of branches. If else, and all of them are looking for a key. So I would suggest the product team to use something like table driven methods, or anything that uses a hash table, or a cleaner approach. So I'm inviting you to do the same. Check the source code, check things, and after you check out pieces of code, you're gonna learn more, and probably you're gonna contribute to the overall community. So thank you very much, and see you soon.